1993. Jensen Huang and two colleagues sat in a Denny's in San Jose, scribbling a business plan on a placemat. They had just started a new chip company. At the time, Intel was already the undisputed king of the semiconductor industry, with billions of dollars in revenue and a name on nearly every computer in the world. Nvidia? 3 people, barely enough capital, and no product. 30 years later, Nvidia...
Hey everyone! If you're enjoying the video, please consider subscribing to help our small community grow. You can also support my work by buying me a coffee on Ko-fi via the link below. Every little bit helps me create better content for you. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video.
Had surpassed Intel in market value many times over. Here's how it happened. So basically, to understand the story, we have to go back to why Intel was so dominant in the first place. Intel was the master of the CPU, the brain of the computer that controls almost all processes. From the 1980s to the early 2000s, if you bought a computer, it almost certainly had an Intel Inside logo on it. They had their own factories, years of research, and a close relationship with Microsoft, a combination people called Wintel. Their position was nearly unassailable. Nvidia started from a completely different angle. Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Priam focused not on CPUs, but on GPUs chips specifically for graphics processing, initially for gaming. This is important to understand. They weren't trying to beat Intel in their field. They were creating a new one. But is it actually true that Nvidia was an instant success? Not at all. In the 1990s, Nvidia nearly went bankrupt several times. Their first chip, the NV1, was a complete failure in the market. They made a wrong technological bet and lost nearly all their major contracts. At this point, the company was just weeks away from running out of cash. Turns out, this initial failure actually became a costly lesson that shaped their subsequent decision-making. Nvidia learned from that mistake and released the Riva 128 in 1997, followed by the GeForce 256 in 1999, a chip they claimed was the world's first GPU, though this claim is disputed by many in the industry. Regardless, the GeForce became the standard for PC gamers, and it was here that Nvidia began to build a stable revenue base. Meanwhile, what did Intel do? They continued to focus on CPUs and briefly tried to enter the graphics market with their own product line, but never seriously considered GPUs a threat. Why? Because, from Intel's perspective at the time, GPUs were only for gaming a niche market compared to the CPU market that was in every laptop, server, and desktop in the world. It was a strategic mistake whose impact would only become apparent decades later. This is where the most important decision in Nvidia's history happened, and it wasn't about new chips, but about software. In 2006, Nvidia released CUDA, a platform that made GPUs usable for general computing, not just graphics rendering. Think of it this way. GPUs are like thousands of tiny workers, each capable of performing simple tasks simultaneously, compared to CPUs, which are like a handful of powerful workers performing tasks one by one sequentially. For graphics rendering, such parallel work is perfect. But Jensen Huang saw something others hadn't. Parallel work is also suitable for other types of computing, including, as no one knew at the time, machine learning. The problem was, from 2006 until about a decade later, almost no one needed CUDA. Nvidia continued to spend huge amounts of research and development on a platform with a very small user base. Wall Street analysts questioned this decision. For years, CUDA was considered an expensive project with no clear outcome. But Huang kept going. He was betting that one day, parallel computing would be crucial for something bigger than just gaming, and that bet paid off when no one expected it. In 2012, 2 researchers from the University of Toronto, Alex Krzyzewski and Ilya Sutskever, under the guidance of Jeffrey Hinton, used NVIDIA GPUs to train a deep learning model called AlexNet for the ImageNet image recognition competition. The result? They won decisively, far outperforming traditional CPU-only methods. It was a turning point that changed the course of the entire AI industry, and at the heart of that breakthrough was an NVIDIA chip that had for years been dismissed as just for gaming. From there, the AI world began to realize that NVIDIA GPUs weren't an optional choice, but a necessary foundation for training machine learning models. Demand exploded from university research labs to AI startups, and eventually tech giants like Google, Microsoft, and MetaTrader. So, where does Intel stand in the midst of all this? They're still focused on maintaining their CPU dominance and have tried several times to enter the AI accelerator market, but they've always been a few steps too late. Intel has never had a software ecosystem as robust as CUDA, which at this point has been used by millions of developers and researchers for over a decade. This isn't just about faster chips, it's about a deeply ingrained ecosystem. At its peak in 2022 and 2023, the generative AI boom, like ChatGPT, drove demand for Nvidia chips, especially the H100 series, to such an extent that the company was overwhelmed by orders. Nvidia's stock price skyrocketed, and by 2024, Nvidia's market value surpassed $3 trillion, overtaking Intel, which was then valued at only around $100 billion. From a company once considered a relative underdog to the CPU giants, it's now one of the most valuable companies on the planet. So, if we take away the lessons from this 30-year journey, there are 3 things I think are worth noting. First, don't try to win in your opponent's battle, create a new one with your own rules. Nvidia never tried to beat Intel in CPUs. Second, long-term bets that seemed unreasonable at the time are sometimes the ones that make the most sense decades later. It took almost a decade for CUDA to realize its need. Third, seemingly unassailable dominance like Intel's can crumble if you focus too much on defending your old market and fail to see the new market emerging before your eyes. That's how Nvidia, a company once underestimated by the world's chip giants, eventually became number 1. Who do you think will be the next Nvidia, a small company that's underrated now but will be dominant in 20 years? Leave your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.